Hello everyone. In this section, we will learn about risks in global supply chain. What could be the challenges? And because of those challenges, why businesses are failing. So we will learn about those challenges, the risks, and we will also learn about how can we mitigate those risks. Now on this screen, there are several risks given with the severity of the risk. So as an example, the most predominant risk is businesses failing to raise the cash or raise new capital, or they're running out of the cash. So they are burning out a lot of money, but they are not having the cash input in the process. So the businesses who doesn't have enough cash to play around, to being resilient, to being flexible in terms of the supply chain, or to make supply chain much more efficient, they might fail. And the failure rate is 38%. Now, the other reasons, maybe there is no market need of the product or the services. So as an example, there was big demand for desktop computers in 1990s, but after 2000 the demand has been changed to the laptops. Now people are buying laptops more than the desktops. Only few organizations or few people are buying the desktop, so there is no need, or no, there is no high demand for the desktop PCs. And that is why, if the companies doesn't have enough cash to switch from one type of production, from the desktop PC to the laptops, then they might fail as well. Another reason could be the businesses are got outcompeted. So as an example, again, if you take the desktop and laptop, so as an example, let's suppose Apple has been the first organization who come up with a laptop, just for an example, who come up with a laptop, but Dell has failed to come up with a laptop. So Apple can outcompete Dell very easily. Also, the competition could be based on the time, which is the lead time, based on the cost, and based on the quality as well. It is possible that one of the organization came up with a business model, but that business model is flawed, that is not working. That is another reason why businesses can fail. It is also possible when businesses try to expand from one country to another country, from one territory to another territory, they have different regulatory requirement or the legal challenges as well. And that is why sometimes we need, or not sometimes, most of the time we need pestle analysis, which has the political analysis to understand the political stability or different type of rules and regulation of that country, that particular country, or the particular industry as well. It is also possible that because of the pricing and costing issues, that you or one of the organization doesn't have the proper pricing or the costing calculations or predictions or the forecast, they might fail as well. Not having the right team, not having the right people for the right job, that is another big issue. Not having the right team, having the right people for the right type of work. For example, right people for the marketing, who understand marketing, who know marketing, right people for production, right people for anything else you have to do for operations, for logistics, or right people for supply chains as well. If you don't have the right people in the team, doesn't matter how good your product is, if you don't have the right marketing people to pitch that product to your clients, then your product might fail as well. Product mistimed, again the same example. If the product is not being launched or introduced in the market on time, that might fail as well, and so do the organization might fail as well. Same example, desktop and laptops. If Apple launch a new laptop before Dell with better features, then Dell is not launching the product on time and they might lose the sales there. It is also possible that because of the time race, because of the race of lead time, and because of to reduce the cost of the production, you might produce or somebody might produce the poor quality of the product or the service, and they will get poor feedback from the customer. If you are going on Amazon and you are trying to buy some product, we always look for the feedback, isn't it? And based on the feedback, we decide that should we buy that product or not. And if the feedback is not right, the product or the organization might fail as well. It is possible that the quality of the product is as per the standard, but people are still giving the bad feedback. Why? Because it is possible that the product is there, the quality of product is there, it is good quality as per the standard, but your lead time, your delivery time is not good enough. And that is why customers are giving bad feedback or less number of points on your product on delivery. So if the feedback is not right, if the product is poor quality of delivery, then it might fail as well. Disharmony among the team members. Maybe you have the right people for the right job in your organization, but they are not getting along, they are not working in a synchronization. Then there could be disharmony between the team members, and because of that your product or your businesses might fail as well. If there is any investors and there is disharmony between the investors, then also it could be a reason of the organization failure. Pivot gone bad. If you have a new product launch, for example, if you got a new idea for product or services and you haven't done proper planning, you haven't do the proper due diligence, then it can go wrong as well and the organization might fail. Burnt out and lack passion. It is possible that, for example, an organization have 3 investors. One of the investors is the level of concern of one of the investor is very high, but the level of concern of one of the investor is very low. So if we take this example, the level of concern of investor 1 is high because of the level of investment that investor made. So for example, 3 investor, one with 50% stakeholding, another one is 25%, and another one is 25%. So 1, 2, 3 investors. Now the level of concern of investor 1 could be high because of the percentage of investment. The level of concern for investor 2 could be high because of the percentage again. But if we look at level of the investor 2 and investor 3 has the same level of investment, but the level of concern of investor 3 could be low because investor 3 is rich enough, not bothered. They have invested in so many other organizations. They are not bothered about this company because 25% is not enough money for them, or they are not earning enough in the organization, in the business. So it all depends on the level of concern as well, and they burnt out and they have lacked the passion about the business. So that could be a reason for business failure as well. So these are some of the reasons why the startup fails or why the businesses fail. There could be several other reasons as well. This list is not exhausted. So there could be several other reasons based on business to business, based on type of product, based on the territory you are working in, or based on the nature of the product. Like we have learned in the other session that the different type of product which is could be for individuals or which could be for the industry as well. So these are some of the reasons why businesses fail, and these all the reasons are risks as well for any business. Risk related to the project planning, risk related to the time, cost and quality, risk related to the lead time, risk related to the poor planning or poor scheduling, risk related to the people who are working in the businesses. So these risks are the major challenges in any of the supply chains or any of the business as well. Now let's define what is risk. Now risk is an uncertain event which we don't know that is going to happen. We can always predict some of the risk related to our supply chains, our businesses, but most of the time it is uncertain event that only happens when there is a certain condition. So risk is an uncertain event which, if it were to occur, would have an impact on the objectives of the product. So what is Nichols trying to say? That risk is an uncertain event. If that will happen, if that will occur, then they will have certain impact on the objectives of the project. Now, when we talk about impact, the impact could be either positive or a negative impact as well. That could have different type of consequences. It could be negative or it could be positive impact. So risk can have, that will happen as an uncertain event which we don't foresee sometime, but we can always predict and forecast that if the certain condition meet, that will happen, that event will happen, and that could have a negative and a positive impact on the organization or on our supply chain. So as an example, COVID-19, we all know about COVID-19. What happened during COVID-19? Most of the businesses were closed. That was a risk. COVID-19 was a risk. That was a pandemic, and we had to close all the businesses. Now, when all the businesses were closed, some of the businesses were booming. For example, demand for sanitizers, demand for hand wash, demand for masks, demand for PPE clothing was increased. There was high demand, and those businesses were booming. Demand for pharmaceutical or demand for medicines increased, and that is why those businesses were booming at that time. So that risk has negative impact on most of the businesses, but that has positive impact on other businesses. So the risk could be uncertain, any uncertain event. We didn't knew the pandemic was coming, but once the pandemic was here, we have seen the negative and positive consequences of that uncertain risk. Now, having said that, we can always think about risk, that if that happen, we can always predict how can we change that risk or the impact of that risk into a positive impact. So that is why we learn risk into our supply chain. So the basic definition of the risk in a supply chain is an uncertain event. Now let's learn a bit more about what is risk. Now, as per the Association of Project Management Book of Knowledge, 7th edition, as a result of certain conditions, so if there is any certain conditions being met, then an uncertain event may happen, and that uncertain event will have a potential impact. It could be positive or negative. It could be positive or negative. It could be any uncertain event. So if there is a certain conditions met, so as an example, we look at the weather forecast. How do they predict that it is going to rain? How do they predict that there could be a cyclone? How do they predict that there could be a hurricane? So what happened? They look at the certain conditions or in the environment. So when those certain conditions develop, those certain conditions meet, they can always forecast or they can always predict that the uncertain event could be like a hurricane, it could be a cyclone, it could be a tsunami, or it could be anything else. So what triggers those uncertain events? We can always forecast. That certain condition, when that will meet, then the uncertain event, which is the hurricane or any other things, will definitely happen. And that will have potential negative or the positive impact on our businesses. So, meeting the certain condition has an uncertain event, and that will have a potential impact, could be negative or positive impact, is risk. So, to understand the risks, we need risk management. And what is risk management? That is simply a process that allows us to identify, to analyze, to determine, to assess, and to establish the risk event. The overall risk, we can understand that through the risk management process. So we can work proactively, optimize successful risk management tools and techniques, and at the same time optimize our supply chain successfully as well. And that is what we need to do. We need to look at that process to optimize the risk, to optimize the supply chain while looking at the uncertain events, and to minimize the threats and to maximize the opportunity, to minimize the negative impact of the risk and to maximize the opportunity. There are several different strategies to do that. Once we understand what is risks in our supply chain, then we can learn about what strategies we should adopt to mitigate or try to eliminate those risks in our supply chains. But before we look at those risk mitigation strategies, I need you to make a list of at least 5 risks associated with the global supply chain between January 2020 till date. So within last 3-year time, the January 2020 when pandemic started, in last 3-year time till now, look at the 5 risk associated. What do you think? Which was the five most predominant risk associated with our supply chains? Now, when I'm talking about the supply chain, I'm talking about the entire supply chain. So you can look at the material extraction, material processing, component production, manufacturing, warehousing, distribution, and retailers. So anything you can think of. There could be possible that there are different risks over here, different type of risk over here, different type of risk over here, different here, different here, different here, different here. But what I'm asking you to come up with a list of 5 risks associated with the global supply chain. Once you have the list, then move forward and look at what strategies could be there associated with the risk you identified in this exercise. Now, some of the risk associated with the supply chains, I believe with the exercise you have at least 5 risks with you. Now, some of the risk with the supply chain could be possibly the risk related with the political stability. The many of the countries restricted travel within within inward or outward from the country. Receivable, many people were not getting the supplies from other countries. Marine insurance were going high. Marine or the shipping line wasn't working as well. They stuck in the sea. They couldn't dock on the port. Trade compliance, there could be several different type of regulations in different countries during that period, that what they can import, what they cannot import, or what they can export, what they cannot export. Foreign practice, corruption, anti-bribery, and all that. There was possibility that there was the corrupt practices came into existence. Security and terrorism was another issue, and there were several other different type of risk associated during that time. Logistics, reputation, branding, market share, personal, financial. There are several different type of risks associated with the supply chains during the COVID-19 and after the COVID-19. Some of the risks were before COVID-19 as well, But what I need you to think about how those risks in this list, how these risks are associated with the COVID-19 and what could have happened and what could have been the possibility to mitigate those risks in the supply chain. Now, risk mitigations are the strategies where the organization try to completely remove the possibilities or the probability of that disruptive event completely. But it's not always possible to remove it completely. But there are some strategies that we cannot have that responsibility of that risk ourselves, but we can always transfer the risks to the other organization. So the supply chain leaders or supply chain managers, they look at the possibilities, how can we reduce or remove those risks from our supply chain. And that is why we have risk management, and risk management has a process that you will learn in the other module. So the risk management has a process where you can think about risk mitigation. You can think about how do you mitigate the risk, what are the possibilities, can you transfer it to somebody else, or what else you can do. So there are 4 main possibilities to reduce, transfer, reject, or accept the risk. Now, the first possibility to accept the risk, where we think about that, okay, we cannot do anything. If there is any natural calamities, for example, if there is any cyclone, then in that case we can't do anything. But there are also possibilities that if there is cyclone, that we can always look for how can we protect our inventory, how can we protect our people, what actions we are going to take. So if there is acceptance that we cannot do anything, then there is no action taken. We can't do anything, so we are not taking any action. So if that happens, then we will see what we can do. For that case, sometime you need to have built-in margins in your profit margin, that you are preparing for, you are accepting that risk, that will certainly happen in future. And for that, you need to have some cash or some liquidity to spend at that time, some cash for the rainy day. So you can spend that money at that time to overcome that risk. Also, you might think about the disaster plan as well, that if that disaster happen, what will be our plan, what we are going to do, what is A, B, C, D, what steps we are going to take. So we are accepting that risk, and when we are accepting that risk, we are realizing that, okay, this is what we are going to do if that could happen. We can also think about reducing that type of risk. So when we are reducing that, we can always go and adjust the goals and the specification of our project plan, of our businesses. We can also think about developing the alternatives, that if we have risk while we are fulfilling this particular aim or objective, for example, there is always risk of not getting supply from one of the particular supplier in Far Eastern country. So if you are not getting these supplies, what are the alternatives available? So same thing happened during the COVID-19. Most of the shipping lines wasn't working. Most of the airlines wasn't working as well. So there was lack of transport for goods to get goods from Far Eastern countries. So do you had an alternative available? What could be the alternatives? Are you going to buy from the local suppliers? Or you can always extend the study and information. You can always look for more information and do some more research. That can we look for much better option. There could be several other possibilities, depends on type of business and depends on the product or the services as well. The next one is to transfer the risk to another organization. It could be possible that you're transferring that risk to your supplier, or you're transferring that risk to your customer. Now, one of the possibility could be that you are transferring the risk to supplier. For example, that you are asking your supplier that if you don't deliver on time, you are liable to pay for the losses. It is also possible that you are transferring some of the risk to your client as well, that if the certain condition happen or certain event happen, that you are not liable to refund the payment to your client. So that is transferring the risk. Insurance is a very good option to transfer the risk from yourself to the insurance company. We all do car insurance, health insurance, or marine insurance, business insurance, building insurance. That is what we are doing. We are transferring the risk. If something happened to the building, if something happened to the shipment, if something happened to the warehouse, then the insurance company will pay you a certain amount. So we are transferring our risks. So instead of bearing the whole loss, the insurance company is going to bear the 80%, 90%, 30%, 40%, whatever amount. Transfer to third party, which is suppliers or your customer. Now the last one is to rejecting the risk, that we know that because of that risk, which is very risky, there is risk to life, there is risk to the people working in the organization, we have to look for some other option. So when we reject the risk, which means we have to redefine the project scope, which means the project is not viable, and we have to redefine the project scope, the aim and objective of the project. So we are going to stop the project because there is risk to life, risk to people, and risk to lose everything, maybe to stop the project or maybe a part of the project. So it could be possible where the people are working in factories where you are using some harmful chemicals or highly inflammable gases or chemicals, where there is risk to the people's life who are working there, or maybe risk to the people in the adjoining properties, and we can reject those type of risk and go and think about again is the business viable, or how can we deliver that product or the services. Now that was a quick introduction to risk management in global supply chains. Now there could be several different type of risks, and risk management not just in procurement, logistics, operations, marketing, supplier side or customer side, it is in the entire supply chain. You will learn about risk management a bit more in depth in other modules.